You said that you felt like an imposter.
I did.
I think everybody does.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you don't, if you don't feel like an imposter in anything you do, doesn't matter what you do, framing houses, electrician, paramedic, PA, doctor, president of the United States, if you don't feel like you're an imposter in those positions at whatever, then you're a narcissist. It makes you're a narcissist if you don't feel like an imposter in what you're doing, at least for a portion of that time that you're doing it.
Yeah, because I think it's arrogance. If you don't have that kind of lack of confidence or that imposter syndrome, then you're probably arrogant.
Or stupid.
Or ignorant, right? Like you just don't understand how much you don't know. And you carry yourself in a way that is just overconfident for what you think you know, but you really don't.
Yeah.
And I think those people get humbled in a hurry, or they're about to get humbled.
Talk to one of the paramedics in your ER, Eddie, about that.
We don't talk names.
When he first came to the street, he came in he was very boisterous. He's still that. Thank God.
I was like, what changed?
Yeah, nothing. That part, nothing. But he came in as, hey, I'm part of the group, and he wasn't part of the group, and he told me one time, because he left here and went up in the mountains and worked for a little bit and then came back. And when he came back, he told me, he said, I just have to tell you thank you. And he'd been riding with my partner and I took him aside and said, listen, you're not that yet. And so you need to kind of cool your jets a little bit. And he said it changed me. He said, I went and worked elsewhere. And he said, when I came back, he goes, I was a different person because of what you told me, that you took me aside, cared enough to take me aside and say, listen, you're not what you think you are. And
yeah, that's what Matt was for me. Cause I think I was getting just arrogant enough with my 6 months of being an EMT that I was starting to not take things seriously and thought that I knew everything. And I think Matt's subtle corrections where it's really hard to make those subtle corrections to your partner because it's conflict. I'm sure taking Eddie aside, that's not super easy. And nobody else had probably done it because it is really difficult to actually give some constructive criticism. It's confrontational, it's uncomfortable. But I think more of us kind of need to do that with newer people that are starting to get to that point where you're you could be a little bit dangerous if you don't change your mindset about this job and realize that you don't know everything. And so I think it's on all of us in healthcare to really do that with the new people, especially that are starting to get to that point where you're you need to be a little bit more humble about this job. And the longer I do it, the more I realize I am not immune to missing things.
Yeah.
I tend to put a lot of stock in my gestalt. And even that, you can't even trust your gestalt sometimes. And was it a mistake most people probably would have made? Probably. But still, my gestalt was completely off on this patient. And I tend to put a lot of stock in it. I really think I have good ability to tell sick versus not sick. I don't think I'm very smart, but I feel like I can do that. But in this scenario, I was completely wrong. Everything you hear today from myself and my guests is opinion only and doesn't represent any organizations or companies that any of us are affiliated with. The stories you hear have been modified to protect patient privacy, and any resemblance to real individuals is coincidental. This is for educational and entertainment purposes only and should not be taken as medical advice nor used to diagnose any medical or healthcare conditions. So it's you gotta, that stuff will have to humble you.
You can't put your guard down.
No. Sometimes the sick hides itself.
Yeah.
And
when it presents.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's wearing a mask. Sometimes it's wearing a mask, and you're like, oh, it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck.
Yeah, must be a zebra.
It's a duck, and then you let your guard down, and all of a sudden it reveals itself, and it's definitely not a duck. You're like, oh my god, I completely missed this thing.
And you got to think patients also are in denial about their symptoms sometimes, and they don't even tell you the whole truth, and you're trying to be that investigator,
and that whole truth may not be anything to them.
Right.
It might be they've been dealing with it for so long or whatever that it just doesn't mean anything to them.
It's not they're trying to deceive you.
Right. They just don't. They
don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to communicate their symptoms. Well, I think that's the biggest part about being a caregiver is hearing what they're saying, but understanding what they're not saying.
You know what's so frustrating, and I know that everybody here has done this, but you talk to your patient, you assess your patient, you come with your working diagnosis, and then you get to the hospital and they tell a completely different story.
Oh, yeah.
Happens all the time.
It's like,
It changes with us. We'll go see a patient and the doc will go in later.
Yeah.
I'm like, they didn't tell me any of that.
Yeah.
Well, they told me the complete opposite.
Yeah.
You know,
Now we're going a whole different path.
Well, sometimes if they think sometimes it's their perception of what level of provider you are. If they think
Very true.
you're the highest level provider, they're going to say everything versus, and because they don't know, we all wear different color scrubs. They think I'm the nurse probably half the time. They probably think I'm the doc half the time. The female doc I'm working with, they think is the nurse the whole time. It's like, and so they are a little bit
they always
less
think
open
I'm
or
the
more
nurse.
open depending on the provider that comes in, what the perception is. And so it changes.
For sure.
yep.
And I think you made a good point, Brian, about the standards that you set for yourself or that the culture is. And I think, cultures change. And like with the private ambulance, if the culture's, the standard is way up here for a long time, like everybody strives to meet that standard. And if standards fall over time and the standards down here, like everything's just going to fall. And I think that's a big part of it too. I mean, that's why it varies, professionalism wise from organization to organization, depending on where their standards are and what standards you have for yourself too. Cause I mean, some people don't even meet the standard of the culture. Their standards are way lower. And so I think it's important to set high standards just for yourself, regardless of where you are and what the culture is. You can carry yourself to higher standards.
I think you have to address culture change one person at a time. And I think the biggest issue that I've noticed, and I could be wrong, but with what has happened with paramedicine or pre-hospital care nationwide is you just had to grow faster than you could, than was appropriate for you to foster that development, right? I mean, we just needed more help. You just needed more help. And I was part of that wave of new help, right? I wasn't groomed to be in EMS. I just wasn't. But when I got into it, I was fortunate enough to have enough mentors to put me in a position to succeed, right? And not everybody's like that. Not everybody is going to seek that mentor. Maybe they're afraid, right? Maybe, there's a lot of, there's a lot of talk about, EMS brings out the alpha dog, a lot of alpha personalities, and I'm going to stand out in a room full of standouts. But not everybody's that way. Not everybody is comfortable admitting that they don't know things, right? Because maybe they're thinking that you're going to hold little value in what they have to say in the future. And I think that's actually one of the biggest things to overcome as a new provider, even at the EMT basic, intermediate, paramedic level, is understanding that the best mentors will understand that you're going to have limitations in your growth and development, and we're here to help you make those big steps, right?